We have an agenda. Are there any changes, additions, deletions from the agenda? If not, we have a motion to approve the agenda.
Also move.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Agenda is adopted. We have minutes of our previous meeting. Any additions or corrections?
I would like to correct my name. I'm an EY. It's not a big deal, but I want to go down in posterity with.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
That's usually the most important thing you get right is.
Yeah, make sure you have the name right.
Make sure your name is right, John. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Any other corrections or changes? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the recommended change to Stacy's spelling of the name?
I will move. We accept the minutes.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Who seconded that?
Michael?
I usually get the third, but I got the second.
Yeah. He was quiet, but I heard it. Public hearings, we have none scheduled. We do have old business. The item of old business is regarding lodging on the first floor in the DW zone district. It's a continuation of the discussion that we started at our last meeting. Actually started a couple meetings back. We have a memo from Mike. And I don't know, Mike, if you want to just go over the memo and...
Yep. So at your last meeting, we talked about the engagement results, what other cities are doing, some potential strategies, and the goals that we're trying to achieve. The path that you asked us to go down was, rather than come with a fully formed ordinance to this meeting, come with a more specific idea of the changes we were going to make that we could then shop around some more with people and get further input. So this memo, this lower half of it, it includes a box that basically summarizes the goals and then some specific changes we would propose that I think is easily communicated to people. And then there's a follow-up memo that talks about how we would intend to do that, to get the word out, with the idea that we'll do that over the next month and then come to your next month with actual engagement and an ordinance that responds to that. So, did people have any corrections you'd like me to make on that before we start shopping it around?
By shopping it around, you mean shopping the creation of a video around? I guess I lost.
Well, that we're going to communicate to people that this is the potential zoning amendment.
Okay.
I'm still, any lodging. I'm still on the side of any lodging should be a conditional use in the downtown district.
So you would remove on the first floor from change number 1.
Correct.
See, I just think that's an extreme measure to require conditional use for any lodging, because, you know, we've had a history of lodging in the downtown district, I mean, for a long, long time. I mean, 100 years, right?
Correct.
You know, and all of those uses seem to be consistent with the experience that the downtown kind of creates. You know, it's pedestrian oriented, it's a mix of types of uses, restaurants and shops and lodging, and you know, I mean, I like that mix. I mean, I think that mix provides the vitality that makes for a good, solid downtown area. If you start to isolate all the lodging outside of the downtown area, to me, you start to change the characteristic of what the downtown.
Right, and
Yeah, why
I have my notes.
Yeah, why are you opposed to that?
So,
Yeah.
historically, Grand Marais downtown area has always been mixed use. We've had businesses that cater to people who live here year-round, long-term residents, and cater to our visitors who come to visit us. Both are extremely important. And I think over the years, we've seen businesses change in buildings, different things coming and going. That's healthy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's not, but I worry about lodging in the downtown district changing the feel of downtown. That we're no longer have that balance and we're catering more to one side than the other. And I worry, because we do know if more lodging is available right now, it will be used. People will use it. And which is opportunity for business owners, property owners, investors, our tax base, it will help. But I see that as a short-term, it creates a long-term problem. That it changes the feel of our downtown if all of a sudden there's somebody that wants to have an insurance agent or a hair salon or something. They're no longer, they may get priced out of that area because it is more valuable to have a lodging facility. We know that with the Blue Water Cafe right now. I worry about that. I'm not saying I'm totally opposed to it. That's why I say conditional use. That there may be times where it's appropriate. It is the best thing. But to me, that, what I call Main Street, is sacred. It's special. We have, just across the highway, Highway 61, there are spots somebody could put up a lodging facility. Downtown, you know what? It's got to come before this board to say, does that really fit? Is that a good choice for that street? So that's my opinion.
I'll jump in here. This discussion has come up a lot over the years. I've been here 16 years and I've seen it surface again and again. And actually the current state of affairs, if memory serves, where there is no conditional use permit process, is relatively new. I think it came about as part of a visioning process about maybe 10 years ago, I'm just going to guess. Prior to that, there were a lot of restrictions on what kind of residential and lodging use could occur anywhere in the city, really. And a lot of it just kind of got wiped out. And it seems like we're slowly putting some of those guidelines back in. We had mentioned across the highway, we do have a conditional use permit process across the highway for any kind of nightly lodging. But I don't believe we have it on the highway, because I think that's similar zoning to this. Whenever you mix lodging style use with business style use, you can have conflict. And right now, we have no way of really regulating a lodging creation. Someone creates lodging next to business. We can't say boo to those people who are building the lodging, if there's something we don't like or not. I agree with you. I don't think a conditional use permit process is going to, as Tim was saying, I value what Tim was saying. Tim was saying we have this great dynamic and diversity downtown of people living, working, the whole thing. I don't think a conditional use permit process would stop that. But I think it would give us a measure of discussion and control that we don't currently have. And it's interesting, I certainly support it for sidewalk retail, or sidewalk influences, because those directly impact the very heart and character of not only downtown, but everything that every vision I've ever seen written for the city stands for, which is a positive pedestrian experience. It's interesting to consider extending it to anywhere, any level. I think that's a valid discussion.
Well, it can remain an open question, and you certainly don't have to decide today as a group what you think about it, because our intention is to go out and ask the community what they think about it. And so knowing that that's one of the elements that is still in question here is good for us. We can try to incorporate that into, we're going to be producing a short video, for instance, that talks about the process, and we can include that element in the video, that question is open, and see if it spurs any conversation.
Yep.
Yeah, but one of the concerns I have, and because I do think we have a healthy downtown, with a few exceptions. The fact that we have vacant lots downtown, I don't think is ever a good situation. But the fact is, we don't control that. The owners of those lots control the fact that those are vacant lots, and
I'm just going to close that curtain while you're talking. It's a little bright on my eyes. I'm listening.
So I mean, I think we just need to be careful in terms of what we're trying to achieve and how we're going about, trying to do that. By singling out lodging. I mean, somebody might come up and say, well, we have enough restaurants. We should be controlling the number of restaurants and making sure we have limitations, or as you say, whether it's tourist or visitor-based businesses compared to locally based businesses. And I'm not sure how you even define some of that, because I don't know of any business here that can exist without the tourism base. Even though that
And the
might,
local support, really.
right?
Yeah,
That's what I
both.
mean. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't think we're singling out lodging by discussing lodging right now. I think we're patching a hole that we created about 10 years ago. And I was surprised. I was part of that discussion, and I was surprised to see it grow. I think I wrote the first editorial that began the discussion of saying we need more lodging and housing opportunities within our business zone. I thought the rules were too restrictive. But I was surprised to see how it just kind of turned into a carte blanche acceptance of everything. I did not ask for that. And of course, it's not my discussion anymore. It belongs to the entire community. But I'd be really surprised if there are other towns with our attractiveness and our need for retail and our need for preserving its character that don't have these rules in place.
Don't be surprised. The
Well-
vast majority of the ones we looked at don't have these rules in place.
But are they as attractive as us? Do they have the same pressure for development as
We're
us?
probably prettier.
I think so.
I know.
I dare say other ones. Anyway,
There's tens of thousands of cities, and we could probably come up with 1,000 of them that are fairly similar to us. So,
Right.
I mean, we should just keep that in mind, that as cool, as special as we are, this has all been done before,
Right.
and a lot of it is being
We-
handled
Yeah.
without rules right
we,
now.
we can look to other cities for examples, but if it isn't helping, it isn't helping. I think we do sense a very definite pressure here to convert or cannibalize our business square footage into lodging.
Yeah, I think you're right,
And-
which is why we're talking about this, but
Right.
don't be surprised if there's another city like ours that isn't doing this, because there's a lot.
Fair enough, fair enough. But I do like to look to them like you're doing for examples. I find it hard to believe that people in our position, in my travels, I don't find places that are so Wild West when it comes to no regulation on the potential for creation of lodging. We don't even have building code. There comes a point where there should be some discussion. I'm really thankful that the work I've done did go through that process, because it just helps engage the community. And so I would think that anyone developing or working in a downtown here would want the same, instead of just pushing something through with really no oversight. Ultimately, you're about the only oversight. And it would be nice if there was a little bit more public engagement. And so I'm pretty okay with it, especially when we are jamming people up against commercial operations. Pretty soon the people are complaining about the smell of the donuts. Or pretty soon people are complaining about the noise of throwing the bottles in the dumpster at 2 a.m. after the bar closes. Because their 2-year-old is trying to sleep. I mean, these are cohabitation situations which may not be prevented through the creation of a conditional use permit process or even more stricter items, but at least, we can maybe avoid some faux pas.
Well, I think one of the things we probably can all agree on is that we're trying to achieve that balance that makes downtown Grand Marais work. And,
Yeah.
the nuances of that are probably more difficult to come by, but I think we all understand that there's some intricate balances there, the relationship between retail and lodging and services that go along.
Yeah,
But
the question I would have for you, Tim, is like, I'm wondering why, I mean, okay, so it's not permitted, but we're not excluding it.
Mhm.
So why, do you think we're just souring the milk by doing it? Is that why you would propose not
I guess-
doing that?
Unless.
I'm just trying to understand why-
I would like
why-
to understand the reasoning to create a level of regulation that we're trying to accomplish. I mean, what is it that we're trying to do that sets lodging apart from other types of
I think
uses?
Stacy mentioned that.
Well, I mean, I think she did,
Just the
but
pressure.
I just want to make sure we're clear on, and not only us, but the community is clear when we start to talk about this, as to what separates that. And when we get to the point, if we had that in our ordinance, how would we make that decision? I mean, what's the basis for us to decide what's
Yeah.
in and what's
So if
out?
we establish this as.
And
So
we
maybe
need to be, we would need to be, I think, have some clarity about that,
we would need to go.
entering into
It
that.
sounds to me, and I don't think this is what you're suggesting, but this is what I'm hearing. You know, based on what I've heard you say on the subject in the past, I don't think it's what you're suggesting, but we would need to go further than a conditional use permit process. We would need to also have clear criteria by which we would approve residential or lodging use in the town. You know, how many per stretch of block, how much square footage per total of a building. You know, and I think to do that, we need to decide what is our critical mass of retail in town. You know, at what point are we straying from being a classic downtown?
I mean, the counted up method, you're right on. The other way to approach that is just on an individual basis, look and see, are we concerned about our critical mass of retail this time when they make a proposal? Do we think that they're providing a pedestrian-oriented experience this time? Are they promoting downtown vitality with their proposal? And rather than worry about the neighbors and, you know, or the totality of it, a conditional use permit really looks at that just this individual time. We don't have to have standards any more than those goals to just as a guidance. It's hard for us to make a case that making something a conditional use is prohibitive, because just think about how many permits you've said no to since you've been on the board. It rarely happens. And so maybe there's a chilling effect, you know, souring the milk, where people don't even come because it's their conditional use. But most of the time, all it does is provide an opportunity for a conversation about what the community's identified as goals, and make sure that we take care of those things rather than just let it be done.
Just to reel the conversation back to, you know, a layman, a layperson coming in, I think most people would be pretty shocked that there's absolutely no city oversight in the creation of lodging above or inside any building in town. I think that would be a kind of a shocking thing to learn. So I think a conditional use permit process, now to bring it back to our more advanced discussion, as part of the broader discussion of an ordinance, some retooling of the ordinances in terms of what we should do. I think it's an important part of it. I don't think it's the only solution. I don't think if we did that, I don't think it would change much of anything, really. But it would be very helpful, and I think it would be important to have.
Well, I mean, I think this is a good conversation to have as a starting point to, you know, giving Mike and Patrick some
Yeah.
direction to
Yeah.
continue to.
So I see it as part of the menu, kind of in the way that you presented it, in which we also, now that you float out this idea of, you know, meaningful retail engagement on the main floor, I think that has to be part of this discussion.
That's
'Cause
far
that's a-
more powerful in my mind.
Yeah, that's a
than
very
number two.
specific concern. And I think going along with that is the public process. And I think you might remember over the years of being in different boards, I generally don't like converting things to conditional use permit processes that don't need to be. I'd rather have a clear set of rules, and if people conform to them. But one like this, maybe.
So Hal, you have anything you want to add to this, or, you know, kind of heard what the rest of us have?
Well, I can
chimed
only
in
add,
with?
tell you this, that I was involved in the downtown council in the city of Minneapolis, and this issue was definitely not wanted with Dayton's and Young Quinlan's and all the retailers. We have a pretty strong retailer group here, and I would like Jim Boyd to make a comment. I understand that the downtown retailers don't want lodging here. Is that correct, Jim?
I would defer to Patrick's survey, which suggested some concern, from the majority of them, yeah. Patrick did that, you recall Patrick did that survey of the businesses, and I think there was a strong sense from most of them that they didn't want a lot of street level lodging. My question is, does retail include, this is a layman's question, does
Yeah.
retail include dining?
Yeah.
Thank you. When you explain it to the public, you might want to explain that.
Yeah, and
I have another question about that.
Yeah, and I think when we start to talk about the types of uses, when you start to single out retail, it's a much broader scope of activity than,
To me, it's the public looking at glass windows instead of blocked out windows. It's the public walking through a door and economically engaging in something instead of a private facade. The world's changing. The internet's made a lot of things possible, but having a vital downtown where people like to stroll and see and do things, there's I'm going to drop a big word here, there's an iconography to these buildings. There's an expectation of a front door and an entrance and a sense of public engagement, and that's what's in danger right now.
Stacy, you had something else?
Well, I'm talking about the retail, and I was thinking about what does that mean if we do, say, first floor retail? Does that mean it could be like a hotel lobby that sells their sweatshirts?
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Is that enough?
Yeah, you know, it's
to
interesting.
consider retail?
Isn't there a basic hotel design hierarchy and code and priorities? I mean, if you look at our current hotel situation, I'm sure we can find an exception, but right now, generally speaking, they're way back off the sidewalks. You know,
There's a
you-
lot of requirements and
Yeah.
really restrictions when it gets more than 10 units. So
Right.
we call it a hotel when it's more than 10 units, and then we have a list of things that they have to do that are restrictive.
Mhm.
When it's less than that, it's just a use and there's no setback requirements and there's not, and as a matter of fact, we want it to have no setback. We don't want it to be setback from the road. So that's where I think maybe, you know, hotels and motels have always been allowed as without a conditional use permit downtown. But we didn't talk about them with the understanding that they were going to be 1 or 2 rooms at a time in 1992 because that just wasn't the case.
It wouldn't have been viable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think, you know, Mike certainly has heard us, and I think he can come back with, he and Patrick can come back with additional information, and
And just so you know, we're experimenting here, right? And we're trying a new way to engage with the community. And so hopefully we'll get it right, but we also want to learn from it, what works and what doesn't. And we're going to ask you to participate in it as well.
Okay.
And so one of the ways we create these videos is Patrick has set up a space in City Hall here where he's going to interview people and ask questions and, you know, cut it down. And you all could potentially be stars of the show. We'd love that if you would help us with that. And if not for this issue, then future issues. And if not for questions, then just here's what we're doing and information that we're going to be pushing out. So
Well, it's
stay
interesting.
tuned.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out what the definition of that kind of activity is. I mean, are we still planning commission, or are we subcommittee of the planning commission? Do we suddenly put on a different hat when we're?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to ask you for too much about what you think about an issue because we don't want to color but hey, why are we talking about this? You know, the public has communicated with you what? That kind of thing. Where you could just kind of report what's been going on here and as a way for us to gather feedback. Part of it is in a situation like this, we're actually trying to gather feedback. But part of Patrick's vision also is to actually send information out to the world about what is it that this crazy little organization does too. So,
My other concern is standard hours, 9 to 9. I come from a background where our busiest hours were from 6 to 10 a.m. So,
I wondered if that might catch a comment or two.
yeah, you know what? I get that you want to drive the night business. I get that. But
Yeah. I borrowed that
there isn't
language.
much happening at 6 a.m., and I don't think it would be bad to say
Well,
there's some
there's-
other little bakery down the street wants to
there's stuff
do
going
try
on after
something
9
up.
o'clock, too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's,
This language is borrowed directly from Excelsior. Obviously, they're very different than us in character. And so this is definitely one of the things I hope we get feedback on is what is our desired standard operating hours that we're going to try to encourage.
And this is, you know, we have a noise ordinance, and we went through these wars not that long ago, and there's a certain level, because we're a music town too, there's a certain level of carte blanche up till, what time is it?
10 o'clock.
10
Mondays,
midnight on
weekends.
Midnight on
weekends and holidays.
Right, exactly. And so this would seem to me to be in conflict with that. But
Well, this isn't a limitation, this is a
Right.
minimum requirement.
oh, excuse me, I misread it.
We're saying if you're not retail, then you need to prove to us
Oh, yeah.
that you're still going to create that pedestrian-oriented vitality. And one of the ways
Gotcha.
you prove it is you're open.
Okay.
But if you put a conditional use permit in there, then you would have some control over, what if the block where the Crooked Spoon is and all, some guy buys it, wants to buy it all out, and boom, you have nothing. You got these poor little merchants that came in town here, and I know because the Cook County Loan Revolving Fund loaned them money, they didn't have any money. And you can't, I hate to be resistant of anything. I think, the lodging issue, if controlled, I would think I would be okay with it. But why not put a conditional use permit on it to control it? Because it could be it could spread into a kind of like a disease, a cancer, and destroy the retail base of joins and people like that who open in the winter and lose money because they want to serve the public. You got to think about those people. I do, because I've been here a long time. So I would be in favor of allowing it, but controlling it. Because if you open it up, then you can't stop it. And you don't know what'll happen.
And currently, too, we need to think about the length of this process, because right now, those gates are wide open.
Right now, we
Right now,
do
the-
authorize lodging above businesses.
Yeah, we have nothing in place to even
Yeah.
discuss it.
So do we have a timeline? Have you guys said there's,
A few months ago, that's why we talked about even a moratorium. It hit a wall at the city council level. But I think, I don't know if any of us was very optimistic that it would actually go through. But it was sort of like ringing a warning bell and starting the discussion. And it's moratorium, for most people, it's kind of a dirty word. We generally don't like to do it. It's not good business. But there are times I've seen that have been desperate enough for it, whether this is I don't know. I'm just saying, right now, the gates are open still. So this discussion and this process that you're sort of creating as we go along, let's make sure it's got a time sensitivity to it.
Well, we're talking about coming back to you at your next meeting with a report. and
Potential
an
something that could
ordinance.
have an up or down vote.
Yeah. I mean, what would you, if we wanted us to, we can actually schedule a public hearing for your next meeting.
In addition to the meeting, or
I
as
think-
part of the
At your,
meeting?
at your meeting.
I think we should see that language before we schedule the public hearing. I mean, I think that, without seeing language, I think opening up to a public hearing,
Would it be possible to see the language in advance of that scheduled date of a public meeting?
Well, you certainly would see it in advance, but not
Mhm.
in advance in a way where you could help me decide whether or not to schedule a public hearing for your next meeting.
We could schedule a special meeting where we discuss that language in advance of that public meeting. I'm kind of opposing you on that a little bit because I don't want to push the time clock.
Yeah, and again, I know you have the sense that there's an urgency to this because it's happened, but, I still got to look back to the history and the opportunities that have been there and the fact that we've only seen one instance where this has really played out.
I would disagree.
I think two clear ones.
Blue Water.
Well, Blue Water's
Stephens.
upstairs.
Blue Water's upstairs.
Well,
and-
she's
and no,
including
but I'm
upstairs,
including
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm saying,
Right,
Downtown.
but this is, but what we
But that
started
is
out this conversation
part
was that
of
main,
the use,
main
right.
floor lodging,
But-
It may not be the
First floor
end of the discussion. but-
Well, I don't know that it's the end of the
But
discussion.
what's wrong with putting a conditional use permit on it? It controls it. I don't know why you're opposed to that. I don't understand it.
Well, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, I'm just saying that what Todd is trying to establish is how fast can we move through this process? Could we have a public hearing at the next meeting? And I just suggested I would like to see language before we, go ahead with a public hearing, just because I think the planning commission, should at least.
You want us to
set-
discuss the language before we go forward with a public?
I think we should be in agreement, or at least have some agreement that that's the language we want to go to the public.
Sometimes the public appreciates that, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't want us working on it sort of behind closed
The
doors.
public, if you hold a public hearing in this issue, I'll guarantee you'll have people here. It'll be packed. There'll be people standing out there by the door because I know who they are.
Well, unless it already says what they want it to say.
What?
well, maybe
We're going to ask
maybe
them what
that's
they
a
want
good
it to say.
idea,
Maybe we'll get it right.
is to have a public hearing to say, give us your input. And next meeting, we'll make a decision based on
Yeah,
what we
You
hear.
know, my experience is though, is when you have a public hearing, you should be trying to give the public the direction that we're trying to head. And if we haven't had a chance to weigh in on that, I just think that we could be opening the door to something that, you know, we're not in agreement with.
We don't want to appear disorganized, but we don't all have to be in agreement either. But
And we might not.
I imagine that could happen.
I think we should make up
Respectfully.
our mind and have a good statement to make on it before we have a public hearing. Because you have a public hearing and you're gonna have I know the merchants are gonna be here and they're gonna be against you.
No, they're not.
No, we think
Why
they're going to
not?
be
Yeah.
favorable.
No.
Yeah.
I don't,
think all of them
well,
will.
I don't know whether they'll all be for or against it, but I think that,
Well, some of them are telling me they don't want any lodging downtown.
sure, they've
Well,
told
that's what
us,
we're
and we've
saying.
heard that, and we've
Yeah.
incorporated
Huh?
that
I
into
think that
some of
means they would agree with some of us and maybe not with some others, I think.
Yeah.
The weight of what we're doing and what I'm hearing is that we're headed towards something that's going to reduce or restrict lodging downtown.
And just to step back from this issue, a public hearing is a terrible tool to get public input. And so we're doing it because it's legally required. And hopefully we'll learn something at that public hearing. But we're trying to supplement that process with some more useful ways to get people's input on this.
Okay, so you're suggesting public hearing because if there's a zoning change,
It's required.
you have to have that,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And these don't constitute a public hearing. They haven't been properly
It has to
posted.
be noticed. Yeah, we have to
Okay.
have an actual
but
suggestion.
Again, I would be in favor of doing it so that maybe some cases there would be a good idea to have it.
Yeah.
But put a conditional use permit on it or you can't control it.
Right.
Yeah. And
Once
then
the
we're-
horse is out of the door, he's not coming back.
But I think that's just one aspect of what Mike is talking about too, is just the lodging portion of that. You know, I mean, there's more to this than just that one statement of
Quite a bit
establishment.
more.
Well,
So,
there may be places where it would make a lot of sense. It might make a lot of sense right where we're sitting here.
Let me make a
Probably
suggestion.
should have apartments here.
I'll make a suggestion, because of course the timeline is important to me. I don't think it's important only to me. Having our act together is important to Tim. Can we schedule another meeting between now and a publicly noticeable meeting? I hate to use up all our time. None of us have.
I don't think we have time to do what Patrick wants to do and what I want to do in terms of engagement,
Mhm.
and give you results of that, and make a meeting notice by the August 1st date of your next meeting. We don't have time to do that. And so if you want to see the results of the engagement before we schedule a public hearing, it can't be on August 1st. It's gotta be later.
When's the soonest we could have a public hearing?
well, maybe the opposite of that would be to have the planning commission meeting at its regularly scheduled date, which would be August 1st,
Yeah.
and to schedule a public hearing
It would-
as a special meeting, which
Probably 2 weeks.
which
you
would
know.
then be
like 2 weeks after that.
later.
Well, it'd be 3 weeks after that. But, you know, your next meeting would be that first week in September, and you could be 2 weeks in front of that with a public hearing. So, and then you could make the next council meeting at the end of August, which is 2 weeks in front of the one that you would have made in September. So you can buy yourself 2 weeks if you want to speed it up.
Again, I'm not opposed to it if you put some conditions to it. But if you don't put any conditions to it, then you can't control and you don't know what's gonna happen.
Right. Agreed. You had mentioned the council in there. Can you just run that timeline by
I
me one
have
more
to
time?
be
Did you follow
excused. I
it?
gotta go
I'm
to
not
Amy
totally.
Klobuchar.
So,
deal.
Okay,
the process.
thank you.
You want to pass a zoning ordinance amendment.
Right.
First thing we have to do is hold a public hearing. We have to notify 10 days before that. And in order to do a 10-day notice for August 1st, we'd actually have to have it to the newspaper by the 17th of July. Because that's the Tuesday before the Friday. When they put it in the newspaper, that's 10 days before August 1st. So there's no way we can turn around by the 17th of July and have gone through the engagement process that we want to do. So instead, if we go through the engagement process and come back to you with the results on the 1st, then we want to set a public hearing. It's not until the 7th that we can put it, that's the next newspaper deadline for publication. We've already missed the one for the August 3rd one. So then it's in the newspaper on the 10th, it's 10 days, it's the 20th. We're talking about that week when we could hold a public hearing.
Okay. Now, assuming we follow this path,
Yeah.
is there any way that we can be notified if there are any requests for, or what would a person, an interested party, say to you if they wanted to start a lodging in the downtown currently, either on the sidewalk or upstairs? Right now,
Potentially nothing,
they don't have to say a thing, do they?
yeah.
They would come and ask for a land use permit.
If they were going to make structural alterations
Right.
to a
Right.
building,
But
if
if
they
they are-
weren't,
Right.
they wouldn't
If they
necessarily have to come talk
they
to us.
converted a building, you might not hear anything.
Yeah.
So,
That's the problem, you know, when we set up a timeline, it pressures people to get off first base if they had these plans. And that's why the moratorium discussion came up the last time around. So I think some people have respectfully backed away from doing it because they know the discussion is in the works. But I don't know. All I can say is it's out there. This pressure's out there while we do this. And there's, again, it shines another light on the fact that there really is no oversight to someone creating this in the downtown. Even though we're talking about it, we wouldn't hear about it. Mike wouldn't even hear about it, you know, unless there's a substantial rebuild going on. So I believe it falls on us to be responsible and to do what we can to move this as quickly as possible. There you go.
So is trying to work out a public hearing at some point in August after we held the planning commission meeting? Does that move that, I mean, that's
I think that's a good goal.
6 or 7 weeks from now, 7 weeks? I mean, it seems like that, knowing what those time constraints are to meet all the requirements, I mean, I don't know that we have a lot of options. I mean, we could do, what Mike had suggested is that we could just put it out for public hearing without us seeing the language, which,
I mean, you can, this is the bones of it, right?
Mhm.
We're going to tweak off of this a little bit one direction or another, but I don't see it changing dramatically from this.
Okay.
there's not a lot of substance to this, and which the language, I think, is going to have a little bit more substance to it.
I think this is 2/3 of the way to ordinance language.
I would, well, that's why I guess I would like to see that language before we put it.
Can we put what we've discussed
Put it to-
into some kind of motion here? Do we have a, can someone, Patrick, are you also acting as secretary?
So am I.
Okay. Who can put what we just discussed into that short little sentence that we need for a motion?
Well, can I suggest, I don't know if we need a motion, because we're not really taking any action, but maybe just to clarify what it is that we've talked about, and that we want Mike to go ahead and work with that process, bring back his and Patrick's ideas for the language to the next planning commission meeting, with the intent that the planning commission would then take that language, try to make sure it's what we want to present to a public hearing, and schedule that public hearing for the earliest possible time, once that's resolved. Does that sound like?
Sure. I'm not sure what the motion is in there.
Well, I don't think we need a motion.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was the.
we're just asking Mike to follow through. It's not an official action of the planning commission.
So there's no such thing as a motion saying that we agree the time is of the essence in this?
You can make one.
I'd like to make that motion, that we agree that time is of the essence and that we won't look for further delays, that we will get this done. Any seconds?
I mean, I don't think you're going to get any disagreement to that topic. I mean, whether you, if
You know what?
if you
I
want it
don't
to be a
know.
motion.
It's
then
not really a very
that's
valid
a second
motion,
that,
so-
I mean,
That was a fine motion, and I would
Yeah.
like to second
It was
it.
a motion out of frustration,
Seconded,
yeah.
seconded by.
Let's call this the frustration
Michael.
motion.
And the
Sorry,
motion is
public.
that time is of the essence to
Yeah.
pursue this, moving through the process as quickly as possible.
There we go.
So,
So, I got the first, you got the second.
Any other comments, or hearing none, all those in favor vote aye?
Aye.
Aye. Even I can agree with that.
Yeah.
That will
Thank
move
you,
the
Tim.
process.
Move it along.
All right, so you have your instructions, you'll bring that information back, and, and even if we could have that language even a few days earlier than maybe normal, just to kind of be able to, because we are going to be right up against Fisherman's Picnic and busy time of the year for people, if we could just make sure we had that language,
Yeah.
to make sure
Busy
that,
time of year for people.
for everybody, so.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go in 15 minutes.
Yeah, so let's.
Let's just do it like Hal. Get up and run.
The engagement strategy.
Do you have any questions about that? I mean, you probably have a lot of questions about that. Do you have any questions you need answered before we go and try it?
About,
The engagement strategy?
I can't say that I fully understand it, but
Okay, I mean, it's fine, you don't have to.
I wouldn't know what questions to ask.
Yeah, so if there's nothing like that's you're really concerned about or really curious about today, then we're just gonna go forward and we'll all learn together what it looks like.
Yeah.
What would you
You've
think-
done this before, though, haven't you? With other
Kind of-
things?
not
You've
like
done
this.
this on
Kind of
other...
not.
Yes,
You have done this on...
Patrick has done this, and
I'd be curious
the
to see
city's
the
been
analytics on
involved
that.
in other areas where we've done some video production, although not very often. And Patrick's really been involved in all of those. So you probably, if you've seen a YouTube advertisement for a local effort here,
I have,
He
so
did.
I know.
Do
I
you,
know I've watched them before.
let me throw this back at you.
yeah,
Is there something we should be concerned about that we should be asking questions about?
not at all. No, this is going to be great.
Then we're
You're gonna
safe.
love it.
It's going to be better than cats.
The one thing that I would like to stress too, that, with this process and with the language that we're trying to create, is that we keep this perspective of trying to create this balance in the downtown
I
district.
think we're trying to protect a balance right now, not create one. I think we're trying to protect
Well,
one that's
create,
good.
I mean, we're going to create something with whatever language we,
Might be preserving something.
Now, yeah,
might-
I preserve,
Yeah.
think it's more
But it-
preserving than...
but if the balance, okay, then, let's not talk about creating.
I think we're moving on.
The balance issue is really the critical element, I think,
Absolutely.
to the
I
downtown.
think that should be a motion, keeping the balance. Along with being really
Todd would
fast.
agree with
Hey,
that,
who wants to
so.
talk about trailer parking?
Yeah, we
let's
got to
talk-
move on.
Okay.
Now I'm down to like
That's
10
right.
minutes, so
All
we're
right.
gonna.
Whose clock are we using?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Talk about trailer parking.
So, we have in the city code an ordinance that requires trailers, which includes motorhomes, RVs, camper trailers, to be parked either in an enclosed garage or in a rear yard. Not in a front yard, not on the street. They have to be in those places. Obviously, there's a lot of trailers that do not comply with that ordinance. We don't generally go around looking for non-compliance on any issue. Rather, we respond on a complaint basis. Well, we've received a complaint on this one. And our first forays into contacting the parties have not led to any successful outcome. So the complaint has been moved up the chain. The city council talked a little bit about it at their meeting last week. And the question is that I posed to them, is this an ordinance that you want us to enforce? Or is this an ordinance that needs to be changed? And I also told them that it would be brought to the planning commission, and so they didn't answer my question, and I think they're hoping that you'll weigh in a little bit.
Okay, let me just jump in here a little bit. This is an ordinance that I've obeyed over the years, much to my great inconvenience.
Thanks.
Yeah, and after talking to you and you telling me it can't be done, so I didn't do it. I don't, when I think about this subject compared to the one we were just talking about, we're working on the vision of the city and these important issues. I don't see personally why we are called to an enforcement issue that's already on the books and is even coming to us. It's not that we're so important, but a person is violating a rule. There should be an enforcement process in place. I don't see us wearing badges and hats. I don't see that as being our job. And I don't see anyone petitioning us to change these rules. And so what I see is a lack of enforcement. So why isn't this being enforced?
Yeah,
what's going
and I
on?
think the only thing that I would add to that, Todd, is just the question of,
And I don't know these people. I don't even know where this location is. Nothing was given to us in terms of, I know, I've heard these names, but I don't know where they live.
Yeah, it's
So
not,
this is
that's
not-
not
this-
really the point, because there's a lot of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. There's nothing
Right.
personal to anyone. I don't know who's got the trailer, or I don't even know the person I think is being bothered. So I went driving around looking. I couldn't find where this might be, so I just gave up. So I don't.
Yeah, and I mean,
I found 3 today.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Sorry.
So the issue, I think, becomes more than just a question of enforcement. The question, because enough of these situations exist out there without enforcement having taken place over a long period of time. The question is, that enters my mind, is there a level of acceptance that might prompt us to want to consider changing the requirements of the ordinance? And I'm not going to put any words in anybody's mouth, because I've done enforcement before. It's not a fun job to do. It usually becomes a low priority because you've always got other more important
Yeah.
things that you want to take care of, and a lot of times
No
enforcement.
one wants to do it because it becomes personal in a small town.
Right, and
You know,
that's
but-
probably why we've not had complaints.
Right. Well, but on the other hand, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt that someone's violating the rule. Just because someone else isn't willing to step up the game of complaint, and now go to the level of the violator and fight. I think these rules are in place to prevent disagreement, not to cause it. And I have not seen much of it. And when someone's been there a little while, it tends to go away. I haven't, but we do have to be careful with something becoming the new norm. And I do believe, especially with RVs, this county has a long history of pretty restrictive RV language. And I think the reason being, because we all know how hard it is to get housing of any form, but you can wheel an RV in and bang. And so it's hard to be against anything that might be termed affordable housing, but an RV is a different animal.
So the occupancy of them is something that we actually have enforced quite a bit more stringently, although in this case I think there's been violations there as well. This is just a parking issue.
So do we need to just reaffirm our current zoning, and is that really what we need to do? Do we need to look at the specific issue? I mean, what do we...
Well,
I think
based on your conversation, actually, I think there's some real important, just not this rule, but enforcement 101 things that need to be cleared up.
Yeah.
We don't have an enforcement provision.
Let me jump in.
But-
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My understanding has always been that enforcement was your role.
You do not have sufficient resources to enforce the rules that you have.
I don't, or you don't?
Yeah,
The city
does not. The city does not. I mean, and this is.
What
I
does that
think-
mean?
But don't we pay for it?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a contract
And we
with
just got a new guy
the
over
county
No.
for
No,
police.
police don't.
Service.
Police don't enforce those kind of regulations.
The police are checking the doorways of every business at 2 a.m. So obviously, we've said that's an important thing to spend our money on. I'm
I
just
don't
raising
know.
the question, is that more important than enforcing our zoning?
So more questions about why don't we enforce this? Because the tools that we have to enforce this are send a deputy, have them write a ticket. Breaking a city code ordinance is a misdemeanor, which means 90 days in jail or a $1,000 fine. And when it's that, there's no smaller starting ground for enforcement.
Other than a phone call from you.
Well, let's assume that some of those things have already happened.
I know, I am assuming that, yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
a few.
Right, but
And
you can
even
say,
a few,
the next step is a $1,000 fine. If you can afford it, pay it.
and if they
But that's
say,
not.
go ahead
That's
and
not
fine
how
me,
the court system works.
And then, yeah,
is the deputy actually going to write that ticket? Is
Why
the
wouldn't
county attorney actually going to prosecute that case?
Why wouldn't they?
Well, because
It's
they
ordinance.
also
Yeah.
have other priorities. And so this is
Well,
a
it just ends up in a
conversation
court
about
backward.
priorities. It's not a black and white, that's a rule that has to be
And
followed.
will,
if it's not yet.
will the judge actually
Wouldn't it be up to-
impose,
Yeah.
impose a fine or
When
a
you write
penalty?
I don't know the legal system. Fortunately, I don't know it very well at all. But when a policeman writes a ticket, you got to pay it by the date that ticket's due. If you don't,
No, you don't.
you could have a problem.
No, you go
Well,
to court.
Don't you go to court to not pay the ticket? Or do you sit there with, do you pinch to the wall and say, ha ha, I didn't pay that? I
It's
mean,
not,
what-
it's not like a traffic fine.
No, they don't have a.
But if that person ever wanted permission for anything, there would be this outstanding ticket.
I mean, it's not like a traffic ticket. They don't just cite you. This is a misdemeanor violation, which means potentially you're going to jail I mean, they would have to arrest you, they would have to charge you.
And they wouldn't do this because of other priorities?
Yes.
Have they told you this?
No, but the reality is,
Well,
the
I-
reality
Can-
is, I mean, I've done
can we
enforcement
tow
for
vehicles?
a lot of
I'm-
years, and the
Take
fact of the
somebody's
matter
private
is,
property off
you know,
of their private property.
No, if it's parked
Okay.
on a city street.
you have an
If
ordinance,
it's
you have
parked-
regulations.
Could that be
and these
towed and
standards.
impounded, you want it back,
You know,
you pay,
There's
the
not
towing
a
company.
uniform system of code enforcement.
Here's what I may be misreading this, but here's what I'm hearing is Mike, are you suggesting we hire someone else with a different definition of police powers and put someone else on the city payroll to get this done? I don't think anyone wants that.
Well-
We don't want someone roaming around who's hated and reviled because all they do is tell people to follow the rules.
Now I'm confused because I thought just about 10 minutes ago you
No.
said that's what you did
No,
want.
that's what we already have in place. That's what I thought with the systems that we have. We have the police, we have your administrative powers. I mean, what more do we need? I don't understand. So what if there's a court backlog? Is that our problem? You know, I say follow through, issue the
Well,
ticket.
the question is, what's your objective? You know, I mean, if there's a violation, what's your objective?
To adhere to the ordinance.
That's right. You
And we
want
have a-
compliance.
And we have a complainer, we have a person, that sounds bad.
But-
We have a
but-
complaint, a complainant, a plaintiff. It's legal.
A complaint,
Anyway.
a complaint.
So, no, we have an obligation now to make sure it's taken. Technically, the obligation fell on you first, because it comes to you with the city and the small town. I think that's kind of your you're the police power. But if they ignore you and defy you, there must be your right to call the cops. I can't imagine it's anything else. Am I simplifying it way too much?
Way
No.
too much. I've called the cops a number of times. Now what?
And they're saying they can't do anything. According to the
Not
letter I
that
read,
they can't.
they're
Not
saying
that
they won't
Not
be able to do
can't.
anything.
Not that they can't.
Just that they won't.
They won't.
Not that they won't.
I totally support them. I just need to
The
understand what's going on.
priority for this kind of level of action is low. And
It
it doesn't
shouldn't.
so
take
maybe
much.
we need to look at
They- so
wait a minute.
alternative.
It's not even like I call the cops, I tell them there's a problem, it's your deal, deal with it. It's I call the sheriff and as a partner discuss how can we deal with the situation like this.
Mhm.
They're happy to provide some advice. Their advice is you need different mechanisms to deal with this.
They don't.
So
You mean
that's-
we spend tax
Yeah, what
dollars
are-
on putting something in place? Or what's our different mechanism?
Yes,
What
and
is
I
that?
think
Well,
that's
that's
a fair
where-
thing to think about.
Does that mean we get a tow truck?
We currently don't do a lot
We
of code
contract with
enforcement.
contract.
If you want more of it done, you should anticipate that it's going to take more resources.
So
Well, and you have two different things. One is code enforcement, which is really outside of the purview of the planning commission. I mean, the
Certainly.
planning commission has
Certainly. That was my first thing.
responsibilities
What are we doing here?
to, well,
Okay, so what are you doing here? Can I answer
Yeah.
that question?
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Yeah.
Why am I checking in with you?
yeah.
Because these are our rules. We don't just have to blindly enforce them. We can change them. It's supposed to be some reflection of what the community wants.
Is anyone asking us to change them? No, we just have some violators. And what we don't have is an enforcement mechanism.
But
No
maybe
one's
they
asking
don't
us.
make sense.
Is it
for-
worth going back in a situation where we have not been actively enforcing and question what are we trying to accomplish with this rule? Is enforcement going to accomplish that? Or are we already comfortable with the way it is, the new norm that you're talking about, and we should recognize that? We've done that before.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if we were concerned about, the spread of lodging in downtown and wouldn't be concerned about the spread of people living in RVs in the streets
not
of the
living,
residential
no,
districts.
Just
just parking. This is just about parking an RV.
How can, we don't have the enforcement either way. I mean, how are you going to know if someone's in there or not? You going to look for
Well,
wires
there's
around town?
two different issues, though. One is occupying an RV, the other is just storing it on your property.
Sure.
You know.
Well, right now, we have a specific person who has their view blocked, if I read it correctly, and a person who's making more and more improvements to that RV to make it seem more permanent and more occupiable. What are we doing about this? Is this for us? We have a specific instance. Do we really want to do we need to open up a big discussion of our entire zoning ordinance?
Well, there wasn't an entire zoning ordinance, not even in the zoning ordinance. But my question was, do you want to enforce it or not? I'm going to go ahead and take it as a yes from you. Does anybody else want to offer a yes or no to
A
that
confused
question?
yes. They like, why are we even talking about this? I guess I'm just surprised the system's breaking down, and I don't know if changing the ordinance is going to make a difference. What's the point of having ordinances if there's no enforcement? And I think that's what the person was saying too.
Did the city council send it back here because they want us to change, to look at changing the? ordinance?
No.
I think there's been a lot of can kicking going on.
Okay.
There, sorry.
All right, let's kick it back and say, enforce it.
Are we being fair? It's
mean-
mostly out of frustration because
Or
I don't think it
change
should
it.
even be coming to us. I thought
I mean,
when
I
we
could
do this.
see where, looking at it and seeing like, okay, maybe we don't want people occupying it,
Mhm.
but if you own an RV, you have it parked on your street in front of your house.
I think there should be a time frame.
So
I don't want to
so-
say no
but-
RV
but
parked there
that's gonna be
forever.
like a
So there we
temporary-
go.
you're gonna
How do we
temporary
decide?
permit or
So
something,
maybe
you know.
what I'm hearing here is the issue needs to be brought back to the council, because really it's not the planning commission's decision whether,
I mean, I think the enforcement should, or
City
whatever
ordinances are
happens,
enforced.
should go forward with
and
this.
enforcement
instance.
as a policy should be something that's coming out of the council.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel uncomfortable talking about it, and for anyone who's personally involved in this specific incident, sorry, I don't know that I can help you here. I'd try if I knew how to, but I just feel like I feel kind of like a fish out of water on this one. I think if we have a breakdown in enforcement, we have bigger problems to discuss, and it's not just the ordinance for RVs. It can be any ordinance they could pick, So there's a certain amount of good neighbor behavior that has to be in place. And if someone parked an RV on my street and was only there for a couple days, I couldn't give a hoot. But if they start blocking it up, leveling it, running cables out to it, and it's there all summer, I got a problem with that. And it sounds like that's sort of happening here. And so we should have a mechanism for saying that's not what we intended. That's not what our ordinance is intended. And you have a complaining neighbor, this is a problem. As Mike said at the very beginning, we generally don't go around enforcing things unless there's a complaint. There's a complaint. So let's not try and ruin everything we have here by pushing us into a situation where we can't enforce it. If we have to take out all the uniforms and go over there and rush you and arrest you and throw you in jail, come on. Let's do the right thing. So no, we wouldn't even have to have this discussion.
So hearing that, is the discussion then to send it back to the council and say, it's your deal,
Yes,
What's your deal, enforce it?
Well, do what you choose. I mean, it's your
Discuss the enforcement.
it's your ordinance.
I would
mean,
say
it's your city code.
Yeah, let's-
What's the process for enforcing city code violations?
at this stage, yeah.
I mean, it's not just this because it's land use related. I mean, it's all city code violations. How are they handled? I mean, it shouldn't be I don't think it's the planning commission's role to regulate or to decide how enforcement takes place.
Certainly not.
No.
So, but it could certainly be a role to talk about whether parking an RV in the front yard is an appropriate activity or not an appropriate.
If there's a public interest in having that discussion, but right now there's only a public interest in what is our enforcement path.
Well, why, if there's a rule about it, it has to serve a public interest.
Okay, so every time someone, I'm sounding like my mom now, every time someone breaks a rule, we have to have a big discussion on the validity of the rule before we enforce it?
Who says every time?
No, that was my mom talking.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom. if you're listening. But I'm just saying, I'm taking a point here
I
off
think
to one side.
every time someone asks about the validity of a rule, we ought to be able to talk about it.
Has anyone asked about the validity of this rule?
Well,
I didn't see anything in writing about
Okay, yes.
that. You?
I'm asking right now.
Okay. So this is generated from you.
Why does that matter?
Just understanding it.
It doesn't. It wasn't generated for me. I don't just sit around making stuff up and bring it to you for fun. This happens in the community.
Mhm.
I'm bringing it here because I need some feedback from you. And
Yeah, and-
so
And I would say, I don't think, as the planning commission, we have enough information to know if that rule is valid today. I mean, when was that rule, when was that rule
Yeah.
created?
Shouldn't-
What was
I have no idea.
And
Shouldn't
was,
the order
is there a
be?
time frame in that?
I mean,
Does it say
yeah, but-
never park there, or does it say
Yeah,
you can
but-
park
but-
there for 3 days?
Never.
or-
No.
Okay.
No.
Shouldn't
Never.
the order
Then I
be?
think that's wrong.
Shouldn't the
Okay.
order be first enforce what we have, then discuss it? That seems anyway. It just seems to me.
I mean,
first
I
of all,
don't see
we have a person
any
who's being
reason or
wrong.
motivation to change the regulation personally, just because there's just been nothing that's been put forward that suggests that there's anything within the regulation that isn't supported, except for the people that are
Yep.
just
Right.
doing that.
I haven't heard there's anything wrong with it.
So,
That's why I'm not putting this on you, but I'm like, where's this coming from?
Kind of are.
No one,
Yeah.
I don't have people,
times.
I have people
I felt
calling me
it
saying,
too.
you know, that darn RV ordinance, that's really important to me. No, I'm not getting that from, of course I'm not.
If you do, would that make a difference?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, stay tuned.
Was it going to be from the people who are currently violating it?
Yeah.
Of course. They know where you are.
And their argument is going to be that they've had
That
these,
would
they've had
actually-
these here for a lot of years, and that nobody has
And
seemed
that's
to
a-
care, be concerned about
That's a
that.
perfectly good discussion to have. I didn't know it was an issue. But I do know this person has an issue, and right now the rules are and the laws are on their side.
Right.
Yeah. And we'll have to see. I don't think there'll be much sympathy for people saying, let's make it okay to park RVs in the streets all day long and all week long and all summer long, and let's not use the campground, and let's not use the hotels, and let's not use all the lodgings that so many local business operators have created. You know, let's just park all over the darn place. And we're in the same concerns. I mean, this is the big subject. The same concerns are where are these being dumped out? Are they being dumped out? You know, and so on and so forth. If these are residences, are they paying taxes? Are they? And it goes on and on. You know, I think there's a wisdom in the way that language is put together. But I don't think that's the subject at hand. I think the subject at hand is enforcement. I think we have a breakdown in enforcement, and that concerns me more than the RV discussion.
So you heard that? Bring it back to the council and
Yeah.
let us,
Yours.
you know, hash this over, and we'll beat it to death too, and
So what?
come up with.
If the answer was yes, we should look at enforcing this. The next step is a lot more information about what that's going to take.
Right.
And
What do we
I'll
do in
bring
these
that
situations?
directly to the
Yeah.
council.
Great.
And we
Thank
won't
you.
ask them
Yeah.
anymore about whether they want us to. We'll just do that.
And like I say, if the public wants to come forward and say, please re-examine these issues, that's fine. But I don't think that means stall on enforcement of current problems. You know, let's start from a blank slate. Let's start with no RVs on the roads, and then we'll talk about whether or not we want to bring them in. Whatever. I'm just winging it here.
All right.
I think we all are.
The last item on the agenda is the draft community vision document, which we,
I thought that was the last item.
Sorry. Now
I'm
let's take
late.
this little nugget instead.
yeah.
It's taken quite a bit longer than we had hoped to get to this point. And so if anybody even has any memory of when we did this, I'd be surprised. But we have this. And there's an adoption process that it needs to go through. Are we there? Is it something you're willing to take through an adoption process, or does it need some changes? Do people get enough time to look at it? Do you want to do something else to review it? Tell me what you're thinking here.
Well, I know the council has spent, you know, time going through this, and I don't know, at the last council meeting, this was brought up too, right? And
Well, it was just sent around for people to look at.
was there any additional conversation about it?
No.
I mean, I feel comfortable with the language that we have there, and that I think that it represents the concerns and issues and the visions that, you know, we're trying to create, and something that could go to the public to get, you know, through that next step. I mean, you don't get there until you present it to the public, but I don't have anything that I would suggest at this point that I would
I think
call
that,
for
pretty
changes
complete.
to it.
yeah, I think running it past us is a courtesy, and I appreciate that. But I think as a planning commission, that really wasn't something that we were involved in the planning on. But I appreciate the courtesy of it coming past us. I don't know that there's any input or shaking up of the process that would give any benefit from us at this late stage in the game. Too much time has gone into it.
Agreed.
I just have a question about this paragraph, and I tried to go online and look for some of this. It says, the community has embarked on a series of visionary planning efforts, and I remember participating in some of these. But it says the Highway 53 redesign, the Cook County Cultural Plan, and the 2010 Recreation Park Master Plan are examples. Do we have those someplace? That, I assume that's what you use to do this? And I was trying to go back and say, what did that really say? Where is that?
That's a good catch on 53. I don't
61,
goes through
right?
town.
Yeah, I was like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it
They're
was
cut and paste and, yeah.
one of the ways that this was put together was to try to benefit from existing public processes that have happened rather than just create new stuff all the time. So, yes, those things do exist. I think that when we had an active Community Vision website, that those documents were available on it, but that's a good point. We can make sure that they're available to folks. And
Well, I
when
just
we
wanted to
do
go back and
put this back
reread
out in the
those to
community,
say,
Yeah.
does that fit with what I remember?
Mhm. But yeah, the master plan is available on the Parks website right now, for instance.
On the Parks website.
The Highway 61, if you Googled it, you'd probably find a Moving Matters website where you could get some background information
Okay.
on that. Is there a clearinghouse where it's
I don't
all
know what
easy
the
to find?
cultural plan is.
Yeah,
was like,
I'm not
I
sure
don't
what
know
that is
what-
either. They might be talking about Go Cook County, for instance.
So those are the questions I had.
Okay.
I didn't understand that.
Do you see anything that would need to change or any impediments to sending this out to the public?
No,
I
I
mean,
don't think so. Besides Highway 53, it might confuse somebody else.
It's a good test to see if people
Are paying attention.
I read it.
So,
clearly.
We need to wrap this up.
yeah, so if that's the case, then
Yeah.
we'll move it on.
It'll be back to you because the planning commission is involved in the official approval process, if nothing more than a shepherding role.
If there's nothing more, then we are adjourned.